Hello everybody, and a big welcome to the 5th Urban Living Lite webinar based around the future of work. Just wanted to say a big thank you to all the happy faces that you see on your screen. All these people are contributing this week to the success of the webinar series. And the webinar series is here really to give you a flavour for what's planned to happen on July the 7th to the 8th, which is the Urban Living Festival. And here's a short promotional video just to give you a taste.
We've all witnessed the speed of change at which the world is evolving, and the Urban Living Festival is now so more relevant than ever as we look to define the future of hospitality and real estate.
Urban Living Festival came about really based around a lot of different hospitality and real estate asset classes all converging really at the same time. You've got co-work, co-live, PRS, built to rent, student housing. So the big idea really was ultimately quite simple, to bring everybody together. So I'm really looking forward to attracting, I'd say, real estate and hospitality urban innovators to explore what I suppose urban living actually is.
It's a thought leadership forum as much as it is a forum for business. I know I'm going to learn a lot, and I'm going to learn a lot about everybody that plays in it, providers, suppliers, tech, accounting services, all of the pieces that you need to make your business successful. I'll learn a lot there.
However far technology moves along, people will always have the need to come together, to socialise, to work and collaborate together, to be hospitable and basically to be social animals.
Okay, super. So this session is to focus on the outlook on the flex economy and the future of the workspace. It is sponsored by Yardi, and there's a short promotional message that we'd like to show you. Thanks again to Yardi for sponsoring the session we're about to commence. Some housekeeping tips. Everybody who is not speaking as a contributor is auto-muted. A recording will be made available and sent to you via email of this session. Do ask questions through the Q&A box just at the bottom of your screen. We'll be keeping an eye on those and asking our contributors some questions from the audience. And all the speaker profiles are on LinkedIn. So do feel free to connect with our speakers during the session. My name's Piers Brown. I'm host of the Urban Living Festival. I really enjoy making business connections and delivering business opportunities for clients. Okay, here's some context of news stories that the Urban Living Festival has run on the website, just really to bring people up to speed with perhaps some of the things that are happening in the office and flex space. CBRE, you know, took a majority share in a US co-working company. WeWork had a big injection of cash, I think the back end of last year. There's a lot of activity going on in the space at the moment. When I was researching the webinar today, came across this quote, which I thought was really on point. I'm not going to read it out, but do spend 10 seconds or so just to have a read of that, because things are ultimately changing and perhaps changing forever. The quote is attributed to Newflex. Okay, brilliant. Here are our contributors today. So Neil, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, Neil Usher. I'm the Chief Workplace and Change Strategist at GoSpace AI. You just saw one of our headlines with our JLL partnership on the screen before you. Been in the corporate real estate industry for almost 30 years and author of 2 books, The Elemental Workplace and Elemental Change.
Thank you. Ted?
Hi, my name is Ted Orff. I am the co-founder of Revolt Ventures, and we are a venture capital fund focused on Series A and Series B technology startups and scale-ups in the real estate technology space.
Thank you. Divya?
Hi everyone, I am an associate workplace strategist at KKS Savills. I've been in the workplace design industry for over 10 years. I work with a wide range of occupiers, including legal, pharmaceutical, accounting, you name them. I look to create robust working environments for our clients with a strong focus on enhancing the physical as well as the digital working experience to really increase productivity and cost efficiency for the businesses.
Thank you. Robert?
I'm Robert Ryan. I'm property director of a serviced office group called Techspace. My background is probably about 5 or 6 years now working in the serviced office and flex sector, and about 22, 23 years developing various hotel brands, mainly in the UK.
Thank you, Robert. And lastly, Antony.
Hello, I'm Antony Slumbers. I've spent the last 20 years starting and exiting 5 different PropTech companies, and now my 6th, which is behind me, is the Real Innovation Academy, which is an online training course for real estate innovators.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so that's the topic today. Divya, you put something quite controversial down on your feedback form for this session, which was based around the office is dead, the future of work is at home, and really just to encourage debate right from the start. Could you just explain your thinking, just based around that?
I first and foremost want to meet the person who came up with that the office is dead. I have no idea how they came up with it. I think it was just something to grab eyeballs. It's absolutely not true. I, for one, I'm desperate to go back to the office. That's not to say that I don't enjoy my work from home experience. It's given me the autonomy, but I miss being in the office. And not just me, 89% of our Savills Office Fit survey respondents also said that the office is a necessity for the way the organizations run, for mentoring, for networking, for injecting into the company culture. It's really essential. It's a big part of what we do. What really has happened through this pandemic, through the last 1 year, is that the traditional office as we know it, the workplace that we knew before March 2020, that's definitely dead. We're not going to go back to it. Workers, employees, they've developed new behaviors, new working patterns. So what that means is the workplace really needs to morph around these new lifestyle changes, these behavioral changes, workers are not going to come back to sit in an open plan, noisy working environment. They want to work in a collaborative working environment, an environment that's safe and also productive. So we're looking at, places that enhance these sort of experiences for employees. And just to say that both employees and executives are looking to create a hybrid environment that sort of brings together working from home and working from the office experience. But both employees and executives have concerns about hybrid working environment, where the employees are concerned about the input, really, how do you collaborate when you're working from home? And executives are concerned about the outputs, really, the productivity. So these things will need to be addressed when implementing a hybrid working environment.
Okay, Ted, from a Huckletree perspective, what are you seeing on the landscape of maybe the future with what? Can you add more to Divya's comments there?
Yeah, for sure. So just by way of background, one of our portfolio companies is a company called Huckletree, which focus on innovation-led workspaces in London and Manchester and Dublin. And what we have found, obviously last year was a trying year for a lot of those in the broader quote-unquote co-working sector. But on the bright side, it encouraged introspection, and I think we're seeing green shoots now. And what has separated Huckletree from some of the others in the environment is really the focus on providing additional services, community-led approaches through events, as well as digital presence, which has enabled them to keep over 70% of their customers throughout this pandemic, which I think is extremely positive. And as we were discussing just prior to this call, I think what this pandemic has illustrated, particularly with the most recent merger of Industrious and CBRE, is that increasingly we're going to see landlord partnerships with some of the best-in-class co-working providers that really, ultimately they're service providers to tenants, and they're going to provide, as what was just mentioned, spaces for innovation, spaces for collaboration, safe spaces that people feel comfortable going to. And there will still be significant value there. And I think if we look at what Huckletree views as the future, I think there's going to be both innovation-led spaces for corporates that are going to look at repurposing their current space or incorporating an increased amount of flexible space there, but also focusing on innovation districts or particular areas which we can foster an ecosystem of early stage startups that will be synergistic to one another.
Okay. Robert, you're right in the heart of the co-working space with Techspace. How did you how have you managed to sail through the storm and hopefully are coming out the other end? What changes did you have to make to maybe your business model that people could perhaps learn from?
I think one of the things for us is we don't have any co-working space. We tend to specialize in scale-up technology companies, so that it puts us in a slightly different bracket. So the average size of our company is, I think, 40 people, and the average length of stay has therefore been about 2 years. So we tend to have very long relationships, which are kept pretty sticky during these turbulent times. And it meant that we were having discussions really early. And I think we went back to April, it's either March or April last year. We contacted all of the member companies and gave them a discount for a period of time immediately. Only a small discount, but a discount to retain them within the buildings. That helped straight away. One of the other things that has helped is we've never been under pressure to grow quickly, which means that we haven't signed deals that are bad deals. We've done deals where we've paid the right price for the right size building, the right location. That's kept us solvent a lot longer than most others. If this goes on for another year or 2 years or 3 years, doesn't matter how deep your pockets are, you're going to run out of money at some point. But for us to actually get to where we are today, and I think we are £140,000 below the budget that we'd set for the past 12 months. We feel pretty robust at the moment, but it can't go on forever. And the office is most definitely not dead.
Antony, you follow this space, you know, very, very granularly. What are you seeing based around Divya and Robert's comments?
Well, I would say that absolutely the office is dead, but in the sense of the office is dead, long live the office. That office is dead. That world has completely gone. Now, it's not necessarily going to go for everyone, and it's not going to go immediately, because not least of all, the way real estate works, we're all stuck into leases, and there's lots of things we can't do, and there's going to be an awful lot of people who don't know what on earth to do, and they're going to hang around and just see what happens over the next six months or so. But over a period of the next year, I think the change that's coming to the office market is absolutely profound, and it's really important to appreciate that the whole market does not need to change for the whole industry to be completely upended. So if you look at the physical real estate industry in retail, that essentially got destroyed by when e-commerce went over 15% of the market. So just a 15% of your market changes basically destroyed the whole business model of the retail real estate industry. And you look at it now, and it's in a dreadful state, and it's got loads of complications coming. So what happens if 15% of demand comes out of the office industry? That's a big implication. My feeling is that the days of the office industry being where we're either all geniuses or we're all idiots, in the sense of we all go up with the cycle and we all go down with the cycle, and when we're on the top of the heat, we're kings of the universe and we're brilliant, and at the bottom we're all idiots. I think those days are going. I think you're going to find the market is going to become much more barbell-like. That there's going to be winners at one end, and basically the winners at one end are going to be cheap. You always do well in real estate if you can offer something cheap, because there's always people who need cheap space. And then there's going to be really good people at the other end who are offering a premium service, but a premium service can be at different levels, in the sense of, I would say, the Premier Inn are a premium operator at one end of the hotel market, and Four Seasons are a premium operator at the other end of the hotel market. And I think there's going to be a rise of all these new brands, and then everyone who gets stuck in the middle, who thinks, well, the answer to this is let's go and just build another building and stick a BCO spec office in there, is going to have real problems. So yeah, I mean, in many ways, I think we should think that the office market is dead. The old office market is dead. This is a real time of reinvention. This is not just a continuation of the last, a bit more linear going on. This is an absolute fundamental break, and we should really pile into adopting that. Whereas I think an awful lot of the real estate industry is paddling up denial like crazy. I mean, some just ludicrous comments coming out of the industry, thinking everyone's just going to come straight back in June and come back to five days a week. It ain't going to happen. So if you start from the premise that all change, and that's a good thing, you're going to do really, really well. Otherwise, you've got a problem coming.
Could I just jump in there and add that I think that it's not necessarily the office, it's our relationship with work that has changed. And our relationship with work hasn't changed for literally centuries. It's been based on presenteeism. It's been based on 5 days a week, 9 to 5. I think that fundamentally has changed, which will have an impact on the way that offices are used, but that the offices will still be needed and required.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. But that's why I think the change is bigger than a lot of people think, because this is not an acceleration of what was happening. If we carried on as before, remote working would have maybe been 20% in 10 years' time, because we were the whole business world was based around presenteeism, and I'm an office-based company. That's what changed. So we need a different product. I'm a huge fan of the office. I think I think there is more money to be made out of offices in the next 5-10 years than there's ever been. But it just doesn't mean, it depends what that office is, where it is, and how it's operated.
Anthony, you mentioned about maybe the fallout in the office space of around 15%. Does anybody, would anybody else like to pop a figure on that? Because I've seen up to 50-60%, just really to give the audience a gauge on maybe, what's at stake here.
Sorry, just to be clear, I'm not saying 15%. I think it's much bigger than that. But okay. I'm saying it only needs to be 15% for there to be really big consequences.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, I want to move the conversation really onto what tenants and ultimately end users would like as a new office culture, community, and more. Neil, your product is quite, revolutionary in the space. Perhaps you could outline a bit more about what it is and what you've found, whilst you've launched the business.
Yeah, I think it sort of follows from the conversation that everyone was just having. I think there are some fairly sort of ludicrous opinions at both ends of the sort of what is effectively a fairly binary debate at the moment. Those who think nothing's changed at all and those who think everything's going to change. I don't think either of those is true. I think the sort of core of all of this, which will answer your question, is that because we've been cast to the four winds, we've all been at home, we've had a huge tendency in the last 12 months to think as individuals and to think about ourselves. When we're in an environment where really, family is probably the sort of the largest of the circles that we have to necessarily consider. Everyone else is, elsewhere. They're all in their own homes. We've been thinking about what we want as individuals and what each person wants. And I get rather tired of hearing these sort of sweeping statements is, what people want is. It's a little bit like sort of, politicians making unsubstantiated claims about, the British people want this or that. Well, do they really? And is this really what people want? What it is a reflection of our experience in the last 12 months, because we've forgotten to a huge degree what it meant to be in a physical workspace. And actually we've become disassociated from that experience in this last 12 months. What is happening is that for the first time, probably, organizations who want their people to work together, in the past, with sort of, individuals had, the biggest complaint in an office was always noise and disturbance, because people were trying to do their own work, headphones on, leave me alone, just go away. Actually now in this sort of state we've been in, we've realized the value of working together. So probably for the first time ever, I think, in the time I've been in this industry, we've got people wanting to be working together with their colleagues and organizations wanting their people to work together. Our heads are all in the same place because we don't work alone. Virtually nobody works alone. And what this leads to is the biggest challenge with the sort of the much talked about hybrid solution is that it's going to be hellishly difficult to make this work. It's very easy for us to understand a world where we all turn up to the office. It's very easy for us to understand a world where nobody goes to an office and we all stay at home. They're very simple patterns. But trying to create a pattern out of that choice as a pattern-seeking creature, as a human being is going to be incredibly difficult. We're not prepared for it. Management and leadership in most organizations are certainly not prepared for it. What this is all about is making sure that the right people can work together in the right place at the right time. So if everybody as an individual is freely choosing where they want to be at a particular point in time, that degree of coordination is going to be unbearably difficult for most people. And let's face it, most people still don't understand activity-based working or agile working in the workplaces that we had pre-pandemic. And all of the credible evidence supports the sort of levels of mobility and the levels of understanding of that underlying workplace philosophy were absent. People set patterns because it's a little bit like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, where he opens his wardrobe and he's got 5 identical outfits because he doesn't want to have to think about what to wear in the morning. We set patterns in a physical workplace, or we did in the past, because that made life easier for us to actually focus our sort of time and our energy and our brain power on the things that were important to us. So if we didn't really get the agile workplace, how are we going to get a hybrid workplace where everybody is freely choosing where to be at different times on an individual basis and trying to coordinate. We can't coordinate a meeting in a physical workplace with someone who's sitting across the desk from us in terms of getting our schedules aligned. How are we going to do that when we've got no idea where the rest of our team are going to be? So the challenge for us in this future is to stop thinking as individuals and start thinking as collectives of people, start thinking as teams and groups of people again, because there's a huge amount of romanticism that has grown up in the last 12 months about this future. And we have to stop thinking as individuals, and we have to start thinking again about working in groups, working in teams, working within organizations, and in a hybrid environment, what that actually means for us on a day-to-day basis. Because it's going to be far more difficult than any workplace setup we've ever had, and that includes the last 12 months. We've managed to make it work in this crisis mode for the last 12 months, but when we can suddenly freely move again, if we think that everyone is just going to get really excited about hybrid and make all of that work, management and leadership are not prepared, people are not prepared. It's not a case of a quick change management program or a 2-week training course for managers in how to manage hybrid teams. This is requiring a systemic and fundamental change in organizational culture. We're not ready for it. We haven't been preparing for it for the last 12 months. And I think for a lot of organizations and people, just thinking somehow that a reduced office space is all suddenly going to make sense is unbelievably wishful thinking. So that's the challenge going forward. It's how now we take individuals who are used to working in a remote and a dispersed fashion into an environment where we can ensure that that social cohesion and that team cohesion can operate, and that people can understand that and they can make it an easy and a seamless part of their lives.
Yeah, that was well put, Neil. Does anyone else like to add to that? In other words, maybe, you know, businesses that are on a journey at the moment, implementing change. Has any of our contributors seen, you know, some good stuff out there that, you know, they'd like to share? Examples of maybe businesses that are on the front foot, you know, embracing office change. You're on mute, Antony.
I was on mute because my dog was barking away like a lunatic. If you look at Dropbox, it's very interesting following all the tech companies are doing, but you always have to remember that most companies are not tech companies, and they work in different ways and they have different jobs to be done, as it were. But Dropbox have been really interesting, and what they're saying is they are still going to be office space, but they're going to be remote first office space. But what they mean by that, because they're particularly largely a US based company, they're talking about remote in that they will have offices in different centers around the US rather than everyone piling into a Silicon Valley. But they're calling them studios, and they're going to be smaller units, and they're very specifically not going to be hybrid offices. And they have a very good article on their blog about why they looked at hybrid, and exactly what Neil just said is so important. Hybrid for most companies is an absolute dead wall. It's a disaster waiting to happen. It's a car crash, and you basically should not go there with one definition of hybrid. If you have a definition of hybrid, that some people are in the office and some people are not in the office, it's calamitous. And this blog post by the CEO of Dropbox said exactly that. We are not going to be hybrid, and that's actually forced them to push their thinking much harder. They said, well, if we're not going to be hybrid, what do we do? And as I say, they're looking at a different model where they are dispersing and they are making offices available to people, but the offices are there to do specific things. Again, very much like Neil said, they're where your team's going to come together. You will not go to the office. In fact, Dropbox are banning people going to their main office to sit at a desk all day long. And so this cultural point is the really big elephant in the room that I don't think people even realize this elephant is in the room. And it's going to cause a real shock. My fear about it is that 6 months into going back, a huge number of companies are just going to go, this is too hard, don't understand it, everyone back in the office, and we'll be back where we started. And I think that's going to happen a lot, because it's going to be a big deal. And actually, to really succeed in the market we're going into, you do have to rework how your company fundamentally operates and thinks. And that's not easy for lots of companies.
Whilst I agree with most of that, the one thing I'm uncomfortable with is the idea of a hub and spoke model outside of any major corporate that can afford to actually run it. Most companies don't have enough staff in a particular area to say, I mean, I live down in Epsom. The company, Techspace, has 40 staff. I'm the only person that doesn't live in East London. There's no point me having a remote office. Yeah, if you go across many companies and businesses, unless you're a very large corporate, it's difficult to disperse. And if you're an operator, it's difficult to manage and maintain and make profitable buildings for smaller groups of employees to work in. So I think you may get it in some places, but it's going to be unusual to actually run a true hub and spoke, unless you're going into a central location where you can have a central headquarter office, which will have the bulk of the back of house teams and others. And you may have specialist teams that are dropped next to maybe transport hubs.
That's because it's not about individuals having an office. And I think, the hub and spokes model is like flares, comes back every now and then. Everybody sort of talks about it and then realizes it's awful, because really, we have to stop thinking about this as being somewhere to work and think about teams being together. It's a point that a hub and spokes won't work, because yes, we might be able to provide an office close to where people live, but actually what's happened in the last 10 years or so is we don't need to do that anymore, because if it's only a desk space you need, you've probably got access to one at home, and if you haven't, there'll be a co-working space within 5 minutes walk of your house if you live in any kind of urban environment. What it's about is getting the right people working together in the right place. So there's been a good reason why organisations have put their workplaces in transport hubs, because everybody can get in from wherever they choose to live, so the right people can be in the right place at the right time. That's why hub and spokes pops up every now and then everyone thinks, actually, that's a little bit too difficult, really, because we're just going to end up with an assortment of people from different teams in a local office just because they happen to live nearby, with no purpose whatsoever. So you'll have everyone sitting there with their headphones on, not speaking to each other again, because why would they? So I think hub and spokes will go as quickly as it's come back again.
I'd like to move the conversation on to employees, and a lot of them have spent a long time away from the office, and there are challenges with perhaps getting people back into the office, from an HR perspective. The way, my point is based around how an individual is productive, and making them productive wherever they are, throughout the world. How are companies? Do you think companies going to manage the process of coming back to work, and take on board the culture, social cohesion that an office perhaps brings? Is an employer going to have to be a lot more flexible to an employee's, let's call them, requirements of work? Are there examples of maybe how people are managing the process of coming back to work, if that makes sense?
I think work's happening at the moment regardless of where people are. People are doing their work, but where they do it is going to change, and how they do it is going to change once we start going back into the office, because part-time you're going to be in the office, or part-time you're going to be at home or any other remote location. The big challenge is creating a equality in the workplace, in the working environment. So working from home experience needs to be as good as, if not better, than the working experience in the office. So you need to provide the same sort of resources to employees, whether they're working from home or in the office. Equally, there is a fear of creating two office cultures, one that is the remote office working culture versus the home, the work from office culture. There's a fear of presenteeism creeping back into the workplace as well, which would people would tend to lean more on people who are physically present in the office versus those who are remote. So are the remote employees going to start feeling left out? This is an opportunity for bringing all stakeholders, bringing all teams together to build a policy, build protocols within the workplace to ensure that this doesn't happen. But the first step to that is putting employees first, asking employees what they want when it is safe to bring employees back into the office.
I think we have to stop thinking, very sort of quick point here, but I think we have to stop thinking that just because a manager would like their people together, it's because they don't trust them. And this is, all over our social channels at the moment. You're either a leader who trusts people and so will let them go and work wherever they want, or you're a leader who doesn't trust people and you want them under your nose. There's a very good reason that leaders and managers like their people to be together. It's because it builds social cohesion and it builds culture. It's not just because they don't trust them. So I've never heard the word presenteeism as much as I have in the last 12 months, but that's not the only driver for a manager or a leader wanting people to be together. And we have to stop thinking that it is, because it's actually really damaging to think that that is the only reason that we would want that situation. Actually, we want people together because they communicate, because they make a contribution, because they actually do a lot of things which are not in their job description, and they're not going to be assessed on, and they're not going to be evaluated on in any way, but they're actually beneficial for the team, beneficial for their colleagues. They are changed and they learn something about it at the same time as well. And leaders and managers can then, if they are good leaders and managers, and that's the big sort of question really, but if they are good, they will see that social cohesion being created before them and around them. That's what they're responsible for. But while we've been working remotely, we've become very task oriented. Yes, we can be productive because we're ticking off a list of things we can do, but actually what we're missing, what we're not contributing, are all the things that we used to contribute when we were face to face. Only when we return to that sort of environment will we start to realize fully and truly what we've actually missed. But we have to stop keeping this debate we have to stop polarizing this debate and thinking that managers and leaders only want to see their people because they don't trust them. I've been working with some fantastic leaders recently who are fantastic at leading their companies and building that culture, who have been missing their people being around them. It's got nothing to do with whether they trust them or not.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to add there that everyone's had this opportunity to work from a remote working environment, and a lot of people tend to relate to remote working as a perk. It's going to be a perk that I'm able to work from home or from a remote working environment. But really, in the future, probably starting now, remote working is not going to be seen as a perk only. It's really a skill. You need to demonstrate that you can work effectively from a remote working environment. You're able to effectively manage teams from a remote working environment, because going back to the point I made earlier, we don't want a remote versus physical office culture. It needs to be cohesive. It needs to look like it's one culture, regardless of where you're performing your work from, because the physical office should not have any effect on your productivity or your performance.
Just to echo that as well, I think that there's a difference between managing and leading. What we've been doing for the past 12 months is managing situations, managing teams, giving tasks and seeing deliverables. What we've not done is lead teams. It's very, very difficult to build relationships, get any creativity, get the cohesion, get the collaborative nature that people naturally do in a physical environment when you're doing it through Zoom. And we all know people that have employed people via Zoom. They've never met them. You can't build relationships, particularly long-term relationships, on a fantastic base without having physically have met somebody. You don't get the creativity without being in the office environment. So I absolutely agree. There is a big difference between trust, the presenteeism argument, and the positive nature of why people do go into offices. That's not going to change. But that's also one of the reasons that the office environment, I think, will change. The office environment will be more collaborative. You will have task-orientated areas. You will have areas where you can sit in a quiet space and work. You will also know that you will meet your teams at certain points in an area that's more conducive than a bank of desks in a soulless office where you see 500 workstations and only 20 people in the accounts team at the far end of the office sitting there. Our environment will change to reflect that, the offices will.
Well, one of the biggest issues we've faced in the last 10 years is this sort of fairly sheep-like procession that the workplace industry has been engaged in, which is to try and, for an office, to try and do a bit of everything, to try and do absolutely everything, and then end up doing most of it in a fairly sort of mediocre way. You know, the sort of sense that if we have to spend all day, every day of the week in an office, that therefore it should provide for our every need. It's impacted the urban environments that most of those offices are located within, because we're trying to do everything internally. But I think refreshingly, what we may well be seeing in the future are offices that are more specific, more targeted. They're not trying to do everything. They don't expect you to be there for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, but they are much better at doing what they're setting out to do. We don't have to provide breakfast, lunch and dinner anymore if we start to work in the sort of manner that most of us on this meeting are describing. You know, we don't have to think that all of those amenities have to be provided in an office. So we may well be seeing the end of the sort of city within a city, effectively, as many modern offices have become.
I agree and disagree. I think, you know, I believe that a little fun goes a long way. So yes, the office doesn't need to provide breakfast, lunch or dinner, but the office is some place where you build culture as well. So, you know, those little birthday celebrations that you have, you know, enjoy a slice of cake, you meet people over breakfast with your colleagues, you're really building culture. You're building relationships with your colleagues, and these are the little moments that are essential. But it's also you know, it's equally important to support the wider communities around the workplaces. So we must, you know, the businesses that have really got affected during this pandemic, the retail, the hospitality business. Yes, we need to go out when it's safe. We need to go out and support those businesses as well. But it's equally important to have those little moments of celebration within the office, because that in the end, culture really supports the, you know, it has a positive impact on the business.
I'm advocating that too. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. That's not what I meant when I said, what I meant was we don't have to provide the breadth of amenities and the breadth of facilities that perhaps we became rather obsessed with providing. You know, it's sort of one-upmanship almost. You know, the office next door has got a gym, a cafe, a creche, and a climbing wall and a table tennis table. Well, we're going to put this in as well. Have all those things and this, and it's better than next door. Yeah. Well, hold on, stop a minute. Actually, to your point, you know, we would actually be much better off buying lunch for everyone every day than we would building some of the stuff we build in an office, because we're going to get a lot more collaboration and social cohesion about bringing people around the table together at lunchtime than we are from building a sort of a yoga center in the office. You know, so actually, I'm completely agreeing with you. It's building culture means doing things that have a broad-based appeal to those people in an organization and make the office work. So I think we spend our money on things like that create that culture, agreeing with you totally, and stop trying to do everything for everybody all the time.
I think that responsibility now shifts from the organization to the landlord, really. Whether it's the landlord of the office or any other space within the neighborhood, it really shifts to them. Because if you said something about gym or yoga centers, I mean, the landlord needs to provide that, whether it's a flex space, restaurants. The more we make our buildings and repurpose our buildings to provide for these things, it's better for the future, because more people can use it as opposed to just one organization using it.
I think the city, you know, there are gyms everywhere. If you're going to central London, there are gyms everywhere. You're better off giving people a subsidised membership to a local gym to get out and support the local community and help that gym survive than you are even expecting a landlord to build it. So maybe landlords have to stop doing some of this stuff too and actually say, look, there are facilities everywhere. We can point them to you. We can take them there. We've negotiated a discounted rate. You just buy into that. Because actually, I think for the first time ever in the whole time I've been in this business, this is no longer just a workplace problem, workplace challenge. This is a challenge facing our entire urban environment and infrastructure. And so as we start to sort of rebuild this and start to recreate this, we have to do it, and you know, as a whole. This is a holistic challenge we're facing. It's not just about the building and not just about the workplace.
Great.
Yeah. And I'm sort of sitting here agreeing to a lot of this, but cannot get out of my head. Yes, totally accept all this, but I don't see how any of this necessitates 5 days a week in the office or even 4 days a week in the office. And the whole thing about culture and bonding and everything. You know, I'd love to sit with you, Neil, but I wouldn't want to sit with you 40 hours a week. But I'd love to sit with you 8 hours a week. We'd have a great time. Probably wouldn't get any work done, but we'd have a really interesting time for 8 hours. And I think what's the opportunity I think we're missing. I'm completely sold on we need to mix these things up. And in fact, for over 10 years, I ran a company where we met up in Broadgate 1 day a week religiously, the whole team, three line width. Everyone had to be there. We went through everything, and when we went out and had a great time, and then everyone went off and did their stuff. Next week, exactly the same, and it really works well. The opportunity I think we're potentially missing is this idea of inspiration and innovation, and you need your team around you from that. Well, if I'm in an office, how many people am I actually going to be, communicating with? Not that many. Whereas I've sat here for the last year, and it may be different for me because I have a big office at home, and I've been doing this for a long time. Usually 2 days a week in London, the rest at home. But I spend half my week talking to incredibly interesting people all around the world and learning new things. If I sat in an office, I'd learn everything about the people just around me. And I think one of the big things about being remote in various ways, and by remote, I'm still saying a big come together, sort of properly hybrid, in the sense of we'd spend time together and we spend time apart, is this advantage of being able to actually get a broader sense of inputs into your thought process, because you're not confined in this little box with this small team. The whole world, the biggest talent pool is the internet. It's not London. Everyone talks about agglomeration effects and you need to get all these people in there and all the talent in London. The talent in London is fantastic, but it's nothing on the talent on the internet. And how do we combine these two? That's sort of the option. And finally, what Neil's talking about, that this is much more than the office, again, underscores why I think this is much more of a fundamental change. Because when you start thinking this is not just about the office, this is about the city and how we manage a city, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
I think that one of the challenges around this is the office is great at levelling increasing diversity and inclusivity. If you have an office, it allows people to go into a workspace. If you don't, and you're a certain age, you may not have a space to work. The biggest influences on my career were not people I reported to. When I started out working, it was people I walked past in the office that for some unknown reason took an interest in me and helped me and guided me. I would never have come across them for any work that I carried out. But as a young person, need instruction, needing leadership, and need direction at that point, I would never have got that without being in a physical environment. So the idea of an office to me is a leveler. The idea of an agile work and a flexible work, and as long as it's managed correctly, would increase inclusivity and diversity. And both those things have got to be good for the community, for ourselves, for our mental health, for our well-being, and the people around us.
But Robert, isn't this one of the foundational advantages of the flex industry? That if I'm in an office and the only people in my office are my company, that's a different thing to coming into your place, and I'm a scale up, and there's 20 other scale ups there, and each of them might be competing, but more likely they're going to be complementary to me. That is building a network and an ecosystem of massively diverse inputs, much more so than any company could get in its own. So again, this is why I'm such a fan of Flex, because it brings properly run. And what I love about your company is very specific. I'm a huge fan of these flex spaces that say our market is this, our customer is this, and we're just going to design everything around the needs of that market. That's hugely powerful. I mean, I honestly think that's going to be the the biggest thing over the next 10 years because it's so powerful. It would even get me in an office 5 days a week, perhaps.
I think that's about market segmentation, isn't it? And
yeah.
you look at it going from the airline industry through to the hotels and cinemas, and we're now seeing it in the flex offering. It's likely to happen. I think it's going to happen. I think that the flex sector is probably 10 years behind the hotel sector. The hotel sector is 30 years behind the airline sector. And I think we've seen that acceleration where you now will have a mid-market, which people will pass by. It's been disrupted. We all know about WeWork. We're now seeing specialist occupiers and operators bringing houses together, whether it be for innovation, whether it be for technology, whether it's for creatives. That is going to grow. It has to grow. It's gone in every other sector for 30, 40 years now.
Yeah, the real estate industry is going to learn about branding at last.
What I find quite intriguing is the different, I suppose, stages of life people are at. And, you know, when I started my career, I couldn't wait to get into the office. I was sharing a house. You know, if you said to me working from home, oh my God, I'd have probably been working on my bed or something similar. How, you know, I think we heard earlier that maybe it's a premium. Working from home is a premium for somebody and stuff, but I don't think it is for everybody. And you know, within my organization, the younger members of my team really need the interaction and find the face-to-face element, the physical face-to-face element, a big benefit. It motivates me by actually seeing them engage. How do you think companies are going to sort of manage that? And also tech's being touched on during the conversation in numerous ways. Neil, obviously you've got a tech product at the moment from an AI perspective. How do you think companies are going to embrace technology, maybe from a remote working perspective, but also on property?
If companies want to do anything other than build an office that's big enough for everyone to attend on a daily basis, then they're going to need some technological support to ensure that they can get the right people together in the right place at the right time. That sort of challenge with the changes in priorities, external pressures, etc., that every organization faces, that sort of responses, the constant establishment of new teams, meeting those new priorities, restructuring that occurs in organizations constantly. Then you add the layer of time over the top of that as the biggest sort of challenge really that any organization is going to face. If you actually just had to get the right people in the right place, that's a sort of one-off exercise, which is what we used to do in the past. Very static approach, creating a static environment. That's why Agile Workplace was successful for a decade or so, because it actually meant, well, you sort it out. You know, we'll provide the generic environment, and the ebb and flow of people will account for that change. Well, the sort of challenge we're facing in the future with more sporadic attendance in a workplace means to actually be able to process that. It's not just a case of reserving a desk. That's sort of just a formalization of the way we used to do it, which was walk in and have a look around. Same principle, same outcome. And it's not just about a desk, it's about working with your colleagues. And I'll keep saying it over and over again, because we work in teams, we work in groups, and we have to work with each other. Antony, you're slightly different. You work with only a few people on a sort of day-to-day basis, have those fantastic conversations. But for the vast majority of the working population, they are working in a team, and they need to work together. So to calculate all that, to compute all that, it's well beyond the capabilities of the sort of the manual-based methods or some of the sort of click and drag type approaches, which are still human solutioneering. This is about using technology to ensure that sort of scheduling can take place, that takes all of the sort of day-to-day pressures away from people. Because what people aren't expecting to do is come back into this sort of, you know, this hybrid type of environment, and we'll use it with a small h for now, to expect to have a whole raft of administrative tasks ahead of them to try and arrange to be in the right place at the right time with their colleagues. You know, we don't want to have to send 100 instant messages to make sure that everybody turns up in the right place at the right time, or we'll just stop doing it, because that's what human beings do. If it's too much of a faff, we'll have a workaround or we'll avoid it. Or we'll do potentially, Antony, what you suggested, which is have a 3-line whip on a particular day, and that's where we're expected to be. But if teams are going to do that within an office environment, then the organization has to know that that's going to happen so they can plan for it. So they're still going to need a technology to enable them to do that and to reflect that change over time, because we're no longer in the business of providing one environment that people will sort out and their presence within for themselves. And what we don't want to have to do is continually change that physical environment because something's happened that we weren't expecting. So we do need generic environments that allow people to come and go, that allow teams to come and go, but the teams themselves, the individuals, are going to need technology to be able to ensure that they can be in the right place at the right time with the right colleagues without it becoming a massive administrative burden. That's what we've been developing at GoSpace. That's why it works. But it's, technology is going to have to be a core feature of a hybrid environment in the future.
I think to add to that, in addition to being able to book desks and meeting rooms, we also need to look at the sustainability aspects of buildings. So if, for example, on any given day in a week, everyone wants to be in the office, we should be able to, by the touch of a button, be able to crank up the heating or the cooling of the building. Or if on any day there's no one going to be in the office, be able to switch off the lights. Or if only half the floor is occupied, then just decommission half of the floor. So sustainability is going to be a big aspect, and how we use the building, the performance of the whole building overall is going to be, we'll need to be able to control that by the touch of a button as well.
But if you've got a building where suddenly there's nobody in that building on a particular day, then from a sustainability point of view, it's not just a case of switching off the lights. Something has gone fundamentally wrong with the planning of the use of that workplace or the intent of that workplace. Because actually one of the things we don't like to talk about, but the pandemic has identified, is that effectively the commercial real estate industry has been supporting around about, give or take, 50% waste over the last several decades. Effectively most office buildings are at least half empty on a day-to-day basis. So we are providing twice as much space. Our response has been, well, let's look at a technology that turns the heating and lighting off. No, let's look at a technology that actually right-sizes the environment in the first place so that we're not actually having to leave twice as much space as we need in the first place, and therefore end up, from an organizational point of view, paying for it, and from a sort of environmentally sustainable point of view, just belching out emissions for a space that nobody's sitting in. So actually the technology has to operate earlier in the process than just responding to empty space. It has to actually operate at the point at which we're planning that space and we're utilizing that space.
I totally agree with that. The second thing that's had a huge boost from this, first thing I would say, as I said before, it's obviously a really bad time to be in flex at the moment, but this is the making of the flex industry. It's frankly been not that great being in prop tech the last 20 odd years because the industry hasn't really cared. This is the making of the prop tech industry, not least of all because there's all the issues we've just talked about there. The only way to solve those is technology, but there's a much more fundamental one now, and that's buildings can kill you. Being indoor with bad ventilation with lots of people can lead to infections. We know that. That's why we're not in buildings. So buildings have got to be made safe, and to make them safe actually deals with a lot of the sustainability things. So there's massive push to all technologies that will enable the buildings to be more sustainable, safer, better adapted for dealing with people's health and well-being. And the industry now has no choice but to adopt them. Previously, it didn't really matter. The last 10 years has been a bull market. Who really cared about innovation or technology? Because you didn't need it. You were making loads of money anyway with the market going up. Now, if you do not make your building safe, then certainly you'll have people like me arguing, do not go in that building. Until they make that building safe, do not go in there. Go in that building. And I think it's a huge push, but it's a massive promotional branding element that lots of operators and landlords will be able to build their brands around. Come to my building because my building is sustainable. It's going to look after your health and well-being. It's going to have fantastic indoor air quality, and I'm going to do all the things that Neil's talked about. Come to me, come to my brand. Boom. That's worth a lot more than Joe building next door, which is just meh. So it's, this is a real world of bugs and features and threats and opportunities. But that's a great thing.
Okay, we're going to wrap up in a moment. Just we've had quite a bit of input, not necessarily on the question side, but very much on the comment and the chat accompanying the webinar as we've been speaking. I think the general consensus has been concerns about younger members of organizations and their career path. Obviously working remotely has its challenges, so the swapping of ideas with others, easy for senior people to work from home, but not necessarily the younger members of the team. And Andrew Wright to Maya, just to conclude, sort of highlights for companies looking to hire and train younger members, like we will likely find that with time, company culture and loyalty will erode with continued remote working. Would somebody like to comment on that just while we wrap up? So company culture and loyalty will erode with continued remote working. Do we agree?
So
in other words, the level of
I think absolutely the opposite, or the potential is there to be absolutely the opposite. To an extent, you've also got to remember that an awful lot of people are working from companies that are building intangible assets. They're building software, they're building services, and to a lot of the people working for them, the brand and the culture is the product. It's not their office building. It used to be, let's all go to the Chrysler building because we work for Chrysler. Now it's, what's my product like? How do people think about, I'm into my product. I work for the people who make Fortnite. I care about what the product is, not what their office is. So there's partly that. But also, I've had a couple of conversations with very senior people in big professional services firms recently, talking exactly about, how do you deal with the new hires and stuff. And a senior partner in one of the biggest law firms in the country said to me the other day, actually, we have found that we do it better now than we did before, because we sort of used to operate before that all the partners, all the gods were in the office building, wandering around, and people were learning by osmosis and stuff. But we didn't really spend that much time with individual people. And he said, now the people I look after, I speak to them deliberately. I speak to them as individuals, and I do it regularly. And certainly if you look at the workings of remote companies, this thing about being much more deliberative, you have to be more deliberative. If I need to speak to Piers once a week, I need to ask him how he is. I need to do all the sort of things that you sort of think will just happen in the office. So again, with this caveat, I'm not saying don't have an office, but a lot of the cultural things can be managed out of being a problem by just operating in a different way.
I agree with that. I think some of our clients, including us, we keep our Teams chat open when we're working on projects. So it's always open in the background. So you can speak to people, you can collaborate with them. And yes, you do get more face time and more discussion time with a lot of your peers and your seniors through this, because sometimes when we were in the physical office, people would be out and about. You won't always see them face to face, but now you know that at the touch of a button, there is somebody on the other end to speak to.
But I think that's a lot of the time because we sort of, I agree with both of you, but we ascribe a sort of a nature to the workplace and the technology. Actually, it's how we use both. The workplace is not fundamentally good or fundamentally bad, neither is the technology fundamentally good or bad. They're both benign in a way. It's how we use them. You could put one company in exactly the same office building as another, do an experiment, put company A in for 3 months and observe their behaviors, and put company B in the same physical space for 3 months using the same technology, and you will get two entirely different cultural responses to both. So I think we need to sort of stop ascribing characteristics to the workplace as if it's actually doing something to companies. It's not. It's how the companies use it, and it's how the companies use the technology. Some companies will develop their younger people extremely well, whether they're in the office or whether they're remote, because their management capabilities are better. They've thought it through, they plan for it better, and they're just more culturally integrated. other companies will fail in both environments and under both circumstances. So really, I think, collectively, all of us have probably and hopefully learned quite a lot in the last 12 months about ourselves as individuals, about our organisations, and the response now needs to be to build better company cultures, and those company cultures and better management, better leadership, and greater levels of communication and engagement. And I think we all stand a really good chance of making it work, whether it's in the office, whether it's at home, whether it's a bit of both. But if the culture's wrong, if the processes are wrong, if the management and leadership is not adequate, then they'll fail whatever solution is offered. Okay, and on that note, everybody, a big thank you for your contribution. I hope you found it useful, particularly with our audience as well. Neil, Antony, Robert, Ted and Divya, big thank you for giving up your time today. Our next session is this afternoon at 2 o'clock, focused on mixed use utopia, work, rest and play, with everybody that you see on the slide. I hope you can join us for that. And tomorrow, just to finish the Urban Living Lite series, there's repurposing existing real estate into new forms, and a discussion on sustainability in urban development. And just a reminder, this is a big event that we've got coming July the 7th to the 8th, the Urban Living Festival. If anybody would like to get involved in the Urban Living Festival, perhaps raise the profile of their brand and do more business, please do get in touch with Katie, as you see there. And finally, a big thank you for attending, and we see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.